Hi, I'm Shammah Godoz, and this is the book replay. Today we're digging into Nigerian poetry, and we'll be reviewing one of the newest books of poetry by Umar Sidi Abubakar, the author of The Poet of Dust. Umar Sidi Abubakar is a naval officer by day and a poet by night. He has been published in various magazines from Brittle Paper to Praxis magazine, and he has collected all of his gems into a book of poetry, The Poet of Dust. This is the second book of poetry, by the way. In this book of poetry, Sidi highlights the need for us to listen to poetry just exactly as his predecessor Ben Okri did. Sidi's Poet of Dust is split into two parts. First is the poet, the second, the poetic manifesto. The poet deals with the travels of a young poet that happens on the Peninsula of Poets. Here he gets sent to the Academy of Poets, where he meets the Academy's resident. His experiences are detailed in the first poem of the same name. Martin Espada welcomed me with a slap on my left cheek. He pulled my hair and tossed me into the Academy of Poetry, where Godoz, an ancient ape, the Peninsula's poet laureate, sat me up and taught me Huku, Yaku, Huku, Huk, the ABC of poetry and the 7 articles of a poet's faith. Wow, what a welcome. These residents deposit lessons in him. There's a lot of name dropping here. You have Rumi, you have Simic, and even the great Adonis, one of the greatest poets of this generation, is mentioned. These lessons learned by these poets are written in the poem, The Instructions to a Poet. The rest of the poems in the first part has Sidi tell us about the evolution of this poet, who is then given an identity called Al-Ashad. Sidi writes about this poet the way God would have written about the process of making Adam. The last poem is like the Torah of instructions that Al-Ashad is supposed to live by as he has now become a poet. The second part of the book, Poetic Manifesto, deals with the nature of poetry itself and the necessity of poetry. This is where Sidi echoes the same thoughts Ben Okri has put forward in his expose, A Time for New Dreams. Sidi critiques what he calls bad poets and bad poetry, tells us about them, tells us how it's brought forth. He basically gives us the lowdown on what bad poetry should look like and what bad poets feel like. He writes lines like, bad poets don't see poetry as a light, instead they see poetry as darkness. And this might serve to explain why some of the poems you read are hard to understand, lost in translation, as if you are feeling in the dark for something you just can't find. The collection itself is very interesting. It is more like an introduction to poetry, and it guides you into what poetry should look like, poetry should feel like, and its functions. It's basically a textbook. I think it should be sold in every school. Tell every student that, okay, this is what poetry is. And that wraps it up for the review. See you next week, where we'll review another book. So subscribe, like, suggest another book for us to review. Just have fun. And return next week.